DJGamers.com.
Now, the Super Game Boy allowed you to play your Game Boy games on your Super Nintendo.
This is a fine item.
You see as it plugs into the system there, and then you just pop your Game Boy game into it. Now, we showcase the Super Game Boy for a little bit here, and you'll get to see all the different aspects that it brought to the table. Now, I want to look at the bottom of this real quick. Yep. It's got the extra chips, too.
Yeah, so what was interesting was Nintendo made the ability that developers could add extra chips onto the cartridges. Now, as you can see, the main part of the cartridge connector is right here. But they have an extra space here that would let the developer essentially create anything they wanted to add in with the cartridge. So they could add an extra graphics engine, they could add extra processing capabilities, you know, that would allow this to essentially have the Game Boy hardware right inside of this.
It was a very neat innovation at the time.
As opposed to this fat brick. You could play your game on the Super Nintendo.
Welcome to the Super Game Boy segment of the Super Nintendo console war of the past.
Let's show off the features of the well, explain the Super Game Boy a little bit, I guess, and then we'll show off the features.
The Super Game Boy was an extra peripheral that you could get for the Super Nintendo. It was essentially a Super Nintendo cartridge that had Game Boy hardware built on it. So you could play every single Game Boy game on your Super Nintendo by plugging it into the Super Game Boy cartridge.
And in color.
Now this would
And
work
in
on
color.
Games that were released even after the Super Nintendo's demise that were original Game Boy games.
Yeah, and
Like-
it was the exact Game Boy hardware. Anything that was released for the Game Boy hardware, it would support.
So it would play even Pokemon Red.
Yeah, that when I played Pokemon originally, all I had was a black and white Game Boy, the original Fat Boy, and I didn't like that thing, so I played it on the Super Nintendo because it was one of the first games to actually have Super Game Boy support, which some of the later Game Boy games would then have, which allowed them to have, I believe, 14 colors on screen at once.
Now the cool thing
I
about
had a Donkey Kong game that played with the Super Game Boy.
The Donkey Kong game was the original game released
and it had
for
a different surrounding background type thing or frame. The games that were released after the Super Game Boy had a frame that came with whatever game it was that was kind of like a skin for the game you were playing. Now let's kind of show off.
The Super Game Boy compatible ones. Not all of them were. You know, it was up to the developer whether they wanted to implement this. But if they did have a Super Game Boy compatible cart, which we won't be looking at one here today, but it would change the background. It would allow them to have up to 14 colors on screen. And if you didn't have a regular, or if you didn't have a Super Game Boy game, if you were playing a regular Game Boy game, it would give you a generic palette of 4 colors, and then you could change the 4 colors to any color you wanted. Basically, it was the original 4 colors that the Game Boy would have, but then you could just alter them. See, there you can see there's some pre-made palettes, and then you can customize them as well.
Go to D. I like D. No, not D.
We need some
E.
purple.
E works. Yeah, E looks really good.
Okay.
Or we can change it. There's more, as you can see.
Yeah, there's
Wow.
tons of them, or you can fully customize it.
Where is the customizer one?
So, of course, here we're looking at Tetris, which was the game that came with the Game Boy.
And as you can see, I'm changing the frame around it. I always like the movie theater frame, as though people were watching a movie.
Yeah, I thought that was fun.
I always thought that fit.
Yeah,
in.
let's go with that one. That
All right,
looks
what else?
good.
Other options? do we
That's
have here?
us. I'm the guy with the cane.
Control type A, B. Change that up.
Now what's this?
This one is the color one. So we
Oh,
can
this
change-
was a fun, almost mini game. Oh no, this isn't that. I thought you went into the
I will. in
where
a
you can make the
second.
custom backgrounds. Yeah, that's definitely worth noting and looking
See,
at.
and there you can also take a screenshot, evidently, for whatever reason.
And if you
I'm
put
not
in
sure
the
what that
password,
does.
it'll save it for you. It looks
Alright.
like.
Oh, that's yeah. It'll save your palette so you can write your number down and bring it back up whenever you want. Yeah. Now here you can make a custom background. This you can't save,
Oh wait.
but you know, if you wanted to theme your background while you're playing something, you can you know, put whatever you want.
And there's NGG.
So as Duck recommends, go to ngg.com apparently.
Well, New Gen Gamers would take way too long to write.
And that's a duck.
And there he is.
Yay! Holding a beer.
He looks so happy.
And smoking a cigarette.
With 3 legs. I wonder what
Anyhow.
that last one is.
What a horrible background.
Yeah, let's go to the movie theater one.
Yeah, I like that one.
So this was a
Alright.
really cool add-on for the Super Nintendo.
And basically you just play your Game Boy games on the Super Nintendo. It would be nice if, you know, the Game Boy screen wasn't very
Color lucent.
yeah. You know,
Color
like,
lucent?
I don't know.
It works. Really, that stuff works. I was just like, yeah. You know, it was very
I'm the
beige.
decider. I
It wasn't
can
black
decide
and
these
white.
words.
You know, they came out with the Game Boy Pocket. It had a more clear screen. Had a clearer screen.
More clear.
Well, that sounded like we were playing Earthworm Jim again. A more clear screen.
Yeah, the LCD technology got better, you know, as the Game Boy went on, and the Game Boy Pocket was basically just a little upgrade of the hardware. But it was the same. Aesthetically, it was different, but it was the same hardware running the system.
You know, and this is a point that has went away over the years. I remember everyone used to bitch about the tiny screen to the point where you had, like, magnifying glasses on your Game Boy that made the screen, like, 1% bigger, and like, oh, I can see it better, and
add
you know,
10 pounds to the weight of the Game Boy.
Exactly, and this just made it easier for everyone. You know, this cut out a lot of the bitching, and
This
honestly,
was such a great product for them to release because
they released an advanced version for the GameCube.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Game Boy player was awesome.
Yeah, and this was the first version of that, and it let you play your portable games at home.
And like
I put 140 some hours into Pokemon Red,
well,
and I would not
Pokemon
have done
probably-
it on a handheld,
Pokemon
only because I
probably
could.
worked out because of this peripheral right here, because a lot of people did play Pokemon on it, you know, and it prolonged the life of the SNES, you know, and it brought a lot of fans to Pokemon. I know everyone who played it when I was a kid back in '96, you know. That's what they had, a Super Game Boy that they played it on. No one really played it on their Game Boy. They played it on their TV screen because it was such an epic game for such a small system.
Yeah, it was. Except for like level grinding, it was tough to sit down and play for long periods of time on the Game Boy. You know, it's a handheld. It's a pick up and go system, and that was one of the first deeper games for the system.
And it would save you a lot of battery life in a game such as Pokemon. You know, you don't want your battery dying when you're in the midst of a great battle against, you know, trying to get whatever it was, your pins or your badges.
Badges, yeah, or replacing the batteries constantly. So the Super Game Boy was such a great solution, and even just getting the 14 colors with some of the games made them a lot better. So then you could play them on the handheld, you know, with the black and white, but then take it home and play it and have the extra color all around
I can
it.
play Tetris all day, but I'm gonna switch out
Yeah.
to a different game.
Brace yourself. It's Super Game Boy from Nintendo. Play your Game Boy games on the Super NES in living color. Even choose your own color combinations. Play all 350 Game Boy games. How does that strike you? Super Game Boy for the Super NES. Game Boy games in color, intense. New Gen Gamers.com